Y'all, if you notice, I'm like really having a hard time getting my words out this morning. Part of it is because I'm a little out of breath. So y'all just bear with me. But I'm gonna keep it a buck. The only reason I had really got in my feelings the way that I did was because of the timeline. Not because it's not true, not because God not doing it, not because God not in it, not because I'm struggling to believe, none of that. It was the timeline. Like, God straight up told me on the phone with my mama, like, you're mad because you can't get there fast enough. Like, he asked me, like, why are you so upset? God did. And for me, it was like, I'm really not gonna have a family and stuff until after I'm 30, am I? And that was hard for me. Okay, now let me say a couple things. One of y'all asked me last week, like, how old are you? I'll be 28 next month. And then another one of y'all had commented under a video before and was like, somebody had said something like, you sound like them women who be talking about like they time ticking. Like, okay, yeah, I have always struggled with that. So that was a part of the release that I had to have in these last few days, right? Like, so this is what I want you to know. You're not a failure if you don't reach something by a certain time. Like, this is what he's been dealing with me concerning, okay? No matter what it is. So for me, like I just said, the example was like being married, having a kid. Like, that's not gonna happen before I'm 30. Is it? Like, that's wild. It might, you know, like, then, which goes back to the other word, crying about it being dramatic. That's not gonna move God, though. You might as well just accept it. Just accept it. You can't control the wind. And something that he was stressing to me is okay, he bringing it back to me. I had said this in what I recorded Sunday. Kairos, Kairos, which means it has an appointed time. He was stressing that to me last week. And then he was also stressing, though the vision tarry, wait for it. And I, you know, like, I knew he was saying that, but I didn't know why. And then it was after the fact, after I reacted in my emotions, to where it was like, oh, you was trying to like prep me for this. Like, because it was one of those things to where it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, this might take longer than I thought. Like, you know, so it's one thing for us to say we can practice patience when we think it's just going to be 2 or 3 months off. But what if it's going to be like 2 or 3 years longer than what you wanted, than what you planned for? And this is important because if you're somebody like me, like, I am a goal setter, but I'm a goal getter. And so I'm not used to like not executing things in the allotted time that I gave myself. I'm not used to not meeting the deadlines that I gave myself, but that's a timeline and a time frame that I put on myself. It wasn't God's timeline. And a lot of times we don't know when the appointed time is, right? For other people, it's different stuff. Like, you could have thought you were going to have this salary by the time you're this age. You could have thought you were going to be in a house of this size or like this when you were this age. Or you could have thought that you're going to have this kind of job, or you would have had this promotion by this age, or you thought this, whatever. You thought you was going to be here. You thought you was going to be there by this age or by this certain time, right? You had a timeline for yourself, okay? And that's a part of what we're having to surrender. The whole timeline, all of it. Like, I was like, God, I thought I already did this. He was like, no, because you wouldn't be upset right now. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And then for some of us, tears reminded me of Sarah and Abraham. This whole like time ticking thing, that's a whole thing for women. So if you're a man watching this, pray for your wife, pray for your spouse, because the devil do beat us up with that. Like, I'm getting old, it's going to be harder to have a kid. Like, that's a real thing, especially if you've had feminine issues before in the past or whatever. I said, for other people, it's different stuff. Like, you could have thought you was going to have this degree or this car or whatever. And notice how everything I'm saying is really like a physical manifestation or a material, which goes back to the heart check from last week from 1 Timothy 6:6. Godliness with contentment is great gain. He's making sure our hearts are content in him. Like, he really is breaking our will. Like, at least I feel like that. Like, he breaking all of mine. Like, you're not in control of your life, sis. That's how I feel like. Yep. I'm not. Because if it was up to me, I would have been married and started having kids like early 20s. But clearly it's not up to me. I'm about to be 28 and don't have not a one child. Like, not one. I'm not married. Like, it's not up to me. It's not. So the sooner we accept that, right? It's bigger than just accepting it, especially accepting it in a way where it's like, well, forget it. Like, I'm not in control and being mad and feeling away. Understanding that you're not a failure and understand that God has things set for an appointed time. He is a sovereign God. Stop fighting him, right? Like, there's a reason you haven't yet, right? So, you're not a failure. We're just submitted to God's timing, and we need to find peace in that, be content in that, not beat ourselves up, and not try to put, oh my goodness, I didn't say that in the last word, so I'll say it in this one. Well, no, it makes sense in this one too. I'm saying I'm used to hitting things in an allotted time. Part of that love and selflessness is not putting your kingdom spouse on a timeline that you created. That's manipulation. Y'all both got to be on the timeline that God has established and ordained for y'all. We feel like failures when we subject ourselves to our own timelines. You can't feel like a failure if you are submitting to God's timeline, because he is a God that does not fail. He's not a failure. So if we're submitted to his timeline, how are we failing? Come on, Holy Spirit. Okay? I needed that. How are you a failure if you're subject to God's timeline? He can do all things but fail. Fail shouldn't even be in our vocabulary. Don't let the enemy make you feel like you failed. The enemy failed. He's such a narcissist. He tries to project how he feels onto us, okay? So I don't know who needs that, but you're not a failure no matter what it is, okay? Love y'all.